Hello, BookTube and Twitter writing community. My name is Tom, and today, in the very first episode of Limited Unlimited, I'll be going over Archie Kregear's new science fiction book, Mission Beta, which is book 2 of The Egress of Humanity. Will Mission Beta be a space opera to remember, or is this story still in stasis? Let's find out. The first thing that I want to point out about my review is that this is part of a series. This is book 3 in the Egress of Humanity series. I have not read those other books, so I'm sure that there are a lot of things that I'm not familiar with the world building, with the protagonist Bianca, maybe. Okay, so the first thing that you notice with the book is that the book cover is beautiful. It's very nicely designed, whoever did it. Really looks great. I want to bring up the synopsis to talk about first. Anti-gravity propulsion enables humans to venture into the vast regions of space seeking empty worlds to make their own. Plucky journalist Bianca Varian joins the second mission to write the ultimate story, humans' arrival to the stars. But when the chosen planet turns out to be already inhabited by a race evolved from something like a jellyfish, no less, they find that the more they discover about them, the more they realize they don't know. Tensions between colonists reach a breaking point when between those who wish to befriend the aliens and those who don't. Can humans learn to control their fear and live in peace with alien life forms, or will fear and violence rule the day? Bianca strives to document the tale of a beautiful, faraway world and its inhabitants, but does she become the story and source of the conflict? Okay, so synopsis-wise, I think that sounds really, really good, really interesting. Definitely curious about the alien jellyfish-like life forms. Wondering like all kinds of things like how do they communicate? Are they hostile? Are they just kind of like floating around? Like that's definitely something that I would want to see. Reading the first chapter, it doesn't really feel like there's a whole lot that I'm missing out on. I feel like it could kind of stand alone, but I'm sure that there will be things later on in the story where you probably would need to read the previous books to really understand what's going on. But that being said, I want to jump into my perspective of how the story plays out. It starts out with blog entries describing Bianca's experience being transported to this faraway planet. It seems like she doesn't really know exactly where they're going to end up. It's maybe just kind of like a colonization mission where they're being sent out into space. They've got maybe an idea of a certain planet where it might be a good target for them to land on, but she's not entirely sure where she's going to end up. So it starts off with her documenting her experience of being woken up out of stasis. And my initial feelings about this is that I feel as though these blog entries kind of act as like a further degree of separation between the reader and the action. I think it's a real challenge to start a book off in this way and to really get readers hooked and immersed right off the bat. I think that Krieger's technical writing is very, very good, and I'm going to go over that a little bit right after this. However, I didn't feel immediately pulled into the story in those first few pages, which I think could act as a little bit of like a entry barrier for some readers. Might open it up and be like, oh, I'm not really sure if this like blog style of writing is really for me. That's my biggest criticism of the book was these blog entries. I wasn't really sure how that would work. I know that Bianca is a journalist and that that's like an important part of her character, but just for me as a reader, I felt a little bit removed from what was going on as a result of trying to read those exposition-heavy blog entries. That being said, once we get past those blog entries and we get into the actual action of the story, Bianca wakes up. Of course, she's disoriented from being in stasis for a prolonged period of time. She's given like a protein shake to kind of like get her back on her feet a little bit. We start to encounter some of the other characters in the story. One of them is Kate, who almost as soon as she arrives on the scene, she collapses and has a heart attack. And my initial impression of that was like, oh, this kind of feels a little bit like contrived, like she shows up and she just drops and then it's like resolved fairly quickly. But reflecting a little bit more on that, I feel like maybe Krieger is setting something up for later on in the story, like maybe there's some sort of like illness that's spreading on the ship, or maybe there's something going on with the passengers that we don't know about yet that he's going to address later on. Like it felt like this was like him setting something up. So I hope that there's something more going on with that. So as I mentioned earlier, I think that Kregear's technical writing is quite good. The grammar is really solid. I'm a stickler for grammar usually, as the guys in my writing group can probably tell you. Um, but I think that Krieger's writing was very good. I want to go over a couple examples of that here. There were a lot of sensory details that Krieger writes that I thought did aid in immersion and did really stand out. Some of the stasis fluid gelled in my hair, and washing the gunk out was a chore. So little things like this, just like the feeling of the what the stasis fluid feels like in Bianca's hair, is something that gives us a sense of what it feels like to come out of stasis. And there were a lot of little details like this throughout the story, which I thought really brought me back into the action and that I think worked really well, and that were a testament of Krieger's writing style being really effective and immersive. The chapter ends with this really interesting segment. She brought up reports received from Earth. 18 years of news to catch up on. Does that mean we traveled 18 light years? I wish I understood the math. So she is 18 light years away from Earth now. And Krieger briefly touches on what it must be like for travelers in space who end up going so far away from Earth that anyone that they knew on Earth, they're basically long forgotten. And I think that that's a really interesting detail. Like, you basically have to leave everyone that you leave behind. It's not like you can text them or call them or anything like that. You know, they're 18 light years away. It would take 18 years just for light to make it there. So you basically, the rest of your life is revolving around everyone that's on the ship. So that's something that I hope Krieger touches on more in the story, the fact that these people are so isolated that these are the only people that they're really going to be able to be in contact with for probably the rest of their lives. And I'm sure that that will create a really interesting dynamic between Bianca and the other crew members as the story progresses. So overall, I thought that this was a really interesting story. I think that the premise is particularly intriguing. I'm really curious to see what some of these alien life forms are like. I'm really curious to see what the relationship between Bianca and her crewmates will become. I think that for an introductory chapter, it's a little bit of a slow burn, but I think that it can get there. I think that Krieger's writing can definitely carry a little bit of a slow start and get you to the more exciting aspects of the storytelling. I'm curious about what the previous books in the series are about. I'm wondering how maybe Bianca got to this point or how she was selected to be a part of this voyage. I think that it's a really interesting series and I think it has a lot of potential. So I would recommend this for fans of space operas, people who are into the more hard sci-fi stuff. I started to read a little bit into chapter 2 just to get an idea of like how far away we were from making contact with these alien life forms. And I don't think that we're quite there that early in the story, but hopefully Krieger gets to that pretty quickly because I think that that is really the most interesting aspect of the synopsis of the action that's being promised when I first click on the book and I'm like, let me see what this is all about. So, yeah, I would recommend this. If you enjoyed this review and you're curious about my own writing, my book, The Reaping of Xanadu, was just released on Kindle Unlimited, so you could check that out. You can find me on Twitter at Stevenson Books. And if you are interested in submitting your own book for review, you can reach out to me either on Twitter or via Gmail. So I hope to hear from some of you soon. All right, thank you.